I had previously tried to grow garlic chives in late spring only to be disappointed by no germination, so as fall approached, I decided to give chives one more try, but this time I was using seed I had collected from chive flowers in my last place. I was sure that these seeds would be very fresh and viable. One of the favorite herbs I like to use and grow is chives. That is because chives, it is a beautiful plant besides being delicious. It is also a very hardy plant. It will grow from year to year and has very few problems. So I think that the most difficult aspect of growing it is to get it to sprout from seed. That is because in my experience I've noticed that when seed is not super fresh, it tends to have a hard time sprouting. It appears that their viability goes down quickly if you don't use seed that's picked from that year, basically. So what I have here is seed that I've saved from my last place, and it will remind me of that place, the first garden, and it will also provide me with delicious flavor for my meals. So what I plan to do is just to remove them from the seed head, because I basically just collected the seed head. So just remove them a bit from the chaff and just sow it into cups. Hopefully get them to sprout before the harshness of winter kicks in, and they should have about 2 months of enough heat for them to grow outside. We'll see if that works. I'm not going to use all the seed, obviously. I usually save some. If it doesn't work, I'll do it as I usually do in spring, and that should work, especially if the seed is viable, which I hope it is. For my failed attempt earlier in spring, I had used store-bought seeds and was unsure about their viability. They were garlic chives, a different variety to these chives. These were the common pink-flowered chives, also known as onion chives, widely grown in countries like France. They are different from scallions that are more widely used around the globe. These finer chives have smaller, more tender leaves. They also don't have much of the mucilaginous sap you find when you cut into scallions. In France, they are used as part of a group of herbs called fine herbe, consisting of parsley, chervil, tarragon, and chives. They give powerful flavor to savory dishes in French cookery. I was using my drilled up recycled teacups, filling them with potting soil. This time I made sure to cover the seeds with a 1/4-inch layer of soil to not repeat my previous mistake. Chive seeds germinate best when not exposed to light, so covering them is essential. My hope was that in just a few days, I would have tiny blades of young chive spearing through the black dirt. Chives have a long history as a seasoning herb. We have documentation that Romans were already enjoying this plant in the 1st century, even though its cultivation goes farther back, 5,000 years ago. Marcus Valerius, a Roman poet, penned the following verse: "He who bears chives in his breath is safe from being kissed to death." Romans also believed that chives could relieve the pain from sunburn or a sore throat. While European colonizers brought to the America the common chives we grow today, as well as the onion, its sister plant, there are wild American chives in North America. Instead of using artificial lights to grow these chives indoors, I decided to put them right close to the window pane, setting the drilled teacups on top of the glass dishes to catch any of the runoff water, much like pot saucers. This way, I wouldn't have to set up a seed starting station in the fall just to have these plants growing. I made sure to water the potting soil well so that the seeds could hasten their germination. All I had to do from now on was to keep an eye and see if the soil wasn't going to dry up. Soon enough, spindly, hair-like sprouts were growing out of the teacups. I knew that they needed more light and had to be planted directly in the ground before winter started to set in, so they would be able to survive the harsh conditions to come. I'll be back right after this commercial. As expected, the chives have sprouted, and it's clear that seed that's just a few months old is going to be more viable. From my experience, it really appears that all of the onion family needs to have really fresh seed if you're expecting to have them germinate in any successful way. Many times I've purchased packets of chives or leeks, sometimes onions, and they may be just a little bit too old. They just don't germinate. So that may be a problem why you may be experiencing some failures with seed germination in the onion family. But as you can see, they all germinated here without much effort. It's been about 2 weeks since I sown them, and I'm gonna be transplanting them. Now, we are right in the beginning of October, first week of October, and I know that the weather has been erratic. We've had sort of a dry period, and this week it's supposed to rain a bit, so that's why I'm choosing to transplant them right now. As for the temperatures that we are experiencing, they've been a bit high, at least from compared to the recent years that I remember. October, around September actually, we usually start having temperatures in the 70s and 60s, and we've had 80s and sometimes 90s in September, and October has had some hot days. Of course, this about 2 days ago is when it started to cool, and we can't know exactly how many weeks of warmish weather above freezing we are guaranteed. So that could throw a monkey wrench, and it almost feels like it's going to go from summer right into winter. That's my inkling. Temperature is changing, the climate is changing, so we can't really know. Now, I know that chives are very robust plants and they can deal with cold weather. I just don't know if they can deal with it this early. Of course, if this batch of chives does not really work because I'm planting them in fall, I still have seeds to plant them in spring in the usual time when chives should be planted. But I was still confident that these starts would be able to get established. I simply planted them in a sunny spot in my raised bed that happened to be bare. Chives is one of those plants that you really should look into having if you haven't grown it yet. Once you get established, it's really resilient, and it will come back year after year, and it flowers from the second year on, and they look amazing. The flowers are either purple or sometimes white, and they have these pom-poms that just bloom, and you can use them almost like an ornamental within your garden bed, and of course pollinators love that. So I really have to get my chives established, and of course this is still a little bit, not as much as I would love to, but my plan is to have chives basically everywhere and use them not only for cooking but to beautify the garden. They also help to deter some pests with their strong scent and flavor. That was an additional reason to grow them all over the perimeter of these beds. You may have noticed that I'm running a little bit low on the mulch here, on the grass clippings, and that is due to the fact that it hasn't rained much, so the grass hasn't produced much biomass to be able to spread around everywhere. That's sort of the Achilles heel of my garden, is getting enough biomass to serve as the mulch layer, especially if I'm just using lawn as the biomass producer. I could venture into other plants that produce a little bit more, perhaps some specialized grasses that grow tall, and I could just cut them and use them as chop and drop. So that's something certainly I should look into the future. As for now, I'll try to cut the lawn as it is right now and at least cover this bed which seems a little bit sparse, and you don't want that. There's one more thing maybe I failed to say earlier. You must consider placement if you want to be successful with chives. They, while they're very resilient and can take some cold weather and such, they need well draining soil and they need to be in a very sunny spot. I did pick that bed here to host them because it's one of the sunniest spots, and while that may not be the final resting place for them, that's a good start. That's one bed that I already have that doesn't have much growing at this point. So later on, maybe I can even transplant them to different places. But the thing is, choose a place that has a lot of sun. The more sun you give your chives and the best well-draining soil you give them, the better they're going to perform. They need that much solar energy to thrive and to flower and to grow beautifully. Now, I don't need to protect it from the groundhog at all because groundhogs don't touch anything in the onion family, in the allium family. Because of that, there isn't much of a reason to keep it in that bed, definitely. I just put it there for now because it's sunny, because it drains well, and because it's prepared. So hopefully they'll grow well through the winter. But their final resting place might be some other bed that doesn't need to be protected. I haven't yet built the chicken wire panels in that final bed there just because there's so many other things to do in here. But I certainly will, and that will be one of the dedicated beds to grow greens and things that I know groundhogs and possibly deer will just chomp on them. Anything in the onion family, be it garlic, be it leeks, be it any onion or shallot, usually are not touched by animals because perhaps they don't enjoy the pungent flavor. That makes a lot of sense. Anyways, with that planted, I know that hopefully I'll have some chives to eat in spring when I feel like they're the best tasting.